Well, greetings everybody, and welcome once again to another episode of the Rec Poker Podcast. Excited to be bringing you a conversation I recently had with Vlad Revniaga. I think you'll enjoy the conversation, getting to know Vlad, a little bit of his story, and sort of how he approaches the game. I also want to thank some of our recent interviewees, Joe Bernard and Matt Hamilton and John Redding. If you haven't heard those interviews, I strongly recommend going back and taking a listen to those. Just great guys and great stuff there. And they've also had some really good results since coming onto the program. So I think there's a strong relationship. Also, just a quick thank you to the Free Poker Network. If you don't know anything about them, I would say check them out if you're looking for a free game in your area. It's a great chance to learn the game, get to know some other people, and work on different aspects of your game, and ultimately playing for free, you could find yourself in Vegas playing for a seat at a World Series of Poker event. So that's a great program, and they've been very supportive of the Rec Poker Podcast. So with that, why don't we join the conversation that I had with Vlad. All right, well, greetings. I'm here with Vlad Revniaga. Is that how you actually pronounce?
That is correct.
Oh, you're
that's
looking
actually,
like I'm actually butchering it.
No. That's actually impressive. I'm impressed.
Okay.
That is correct.
Well, I've been practicing all the way here. I was driving to your place. I'm like, Revniaga. No. Just trying to practice. But I've got to know you just a little bit. I'd say we're poker acquaintances, but mostly because you've been generous and you've been involved with All In for Africa. Mm-hmm. So that's how I've gotten to know you a little bit. You've been a bounty in that thing and that sort of thing. But, very well-respected young player in the game here in Minnesota. So super excited that you're willing to take the time and
not a problem
and give away all your secrets.
Of course.
That's why we're here. But just get started. Just give us a bit of a idea of your background. How did you get into poker? What sort of games are you playing now? Where do you play? What kind of frequency? Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit of your poker story, if you will.
Sure, not a problem. Yeah, I started playing probably a common story. Actually, before college, I'd say during the moneymaker boom, I guess, when poker was really blowing up on ESPN. And just got into it because we had off-campus lunch in high school, so we'd always gather at like a friend's house, and they would have poker on in the background and then play like a sit and go or whatever, where I didn't really know what was going on, but I just found it interesting. So started toying around with like party poker, with like playing money basically. And then just since I lived so close to Canterbury, because I went to Burnsville High School, when I turned 18, I played Limit Hold'em. That was my first real exposure to poker. So that was like my, the beginning part of it. I don't know if I was really in love with it right away, or, I just liked the feeling that I could control what I'm doing more or less, that I was playing against people, not the house. But yeah, I'd say in college when I met still one of my best friends, Brant Wolf, that's when I got into online poker. He was playing on Full Tilt Poker Stars at the time, and I'd say that's probably when I fell in love with poker, once I really learned about online poker. Looking back on it now, I thought it was good, but I wasn't very good.
Yeah.
But it's kind of one of those things where like I wish I knew now what I knew then, because I wasn't very motivated back then, but yet I had all the freedom in the world, with obviously college, no responsibilities, etc. But
did you say college, no responsibilities?
yeah, basically. But yeah, and then when I did have some decent scores on Full Tilt here and there, but I'd say, thinking to how good I thought it was to how bad I actually was, it's quite laughable. But and also like right during Black Friday, I went on a really bad run, and like that's when I really started to try to figure out, am I just clicking buttons basically, or do I really know what I'm doing more or less? Because it was, I think, like my first like quite significant downswing after like some nice scores, but it really put things into perspective. It was probably what I needed. Black Friday unfortunately came right at that time, so I got back into live poker. Then
and so we're at the, sorry to interrupt you, but at the time of Black Friday, were you just playing cash online and cash live? Were you playing MTTs both places?
Actually, yeah, I probably didn't mention this, but I ended up graduating with my construction management degree also, so I actually had an internship at the company I still work for right now. doing project management and estimating for a commercial construction company, focusing on commercial interiors, ceilings, the wall panels specifically for myself.
Do you want to give them a shout out at all?
Sonus Interiors, yeah, of course. I should probably say that, huh?
Yeah.
But yeah, they've been really great and flexible, and it's just like a great spot to work. So they've allowed me the flexibility to still have poker as like a side job more or less. And, I can't be thankful enough for that, because Sonus is, that job and poker also like tie hand in hand. It's funny. There's a lot of similarities between the two, between bidding work competitively against other subcontractors or general contractors, and, playing poker. It's kind of, as a lot of things in life, poker imitates it. But yeah, so I'd say right after college, I got that internship there, and I was actually in the process of trying to figure out where I wanted to move when Black Friday happened. I was still going up to play poker a lot with Brant up north in Coon Rapids. That's where he moved after college.
Okay.
And I was actually living at home, still debating, do I want to move up with him? Do I want to get a place around my, Burnsville where I grew up? Then I met my wife. So then after like a year or so, we started looking for a house. And we landed back here in Burnsville. So I was playing live poker, and then I ran into a person that was sponsored by an online poker site here, which reintroduced me to the American sites, to Carbon, to Lock at the time. And now I play a lot on WP, on the Winning Poker Network mostly, which is the home of ACR, America's Card Room, Black Chip Poker, Poker Host, etc., and then Ignition, which is Bovada. But I mean, the American sites, they are what they are. I mean, there's still money to be made on them, but you have to deal with, uncertainty. There's always, it's kind of like,
you got to work pretty hard to get.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that the fields are smaller. I mean, there's still good money to be made, but there's technically it's like a black market, you could say, but yet it's completely, people from other countries are coming to play here now because they've gotten so big. And I mean, people get paid, there's no issues with that, but it's like, for example, they can cancel tournaments for no reason and don't have to say anything to anybody. You don't know if they're going to get shut down at any point in the day. But regardless, it's still, and they're obviously much smaller. It's not like the other sites, but there's enough of a market to, make it sustainable to play on them and have, if you're, building yourself up an edge, if you're studying, if you're working hard at it, to actually make significant money doing it. But it's not easy, just like anything. It's a grind. I mean, but yeah, I think that's where my focus has been probably over the last couple of years, 2 to 3 years, and then traveling to some, 1Ks and whatnot around the region that fit my schedule, fit work, fit life, with a wife and a kid.
So you're not playing a lot of live tournaments at this point? Almost everything's online, or besides the ones you go to, the travel to?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's probably like, 75-25 right now, yeah. And I mean, I prefer to keep it that way. I mean, it's online, I think, is just kind of where, at least for now, it's kind of where, the bread and butter is. It's where you may, not necessarily that, but it's, in my opinion, and I mean, no offense to like anybody that only plays live poker, it's where like real poker is. Like, that's where, like, if you want to get good at poker, if you want to learn poker, you have to start online. I mean, people can get good by only playing live, but it's going to take you a lot longer just by the nature of the game. If you think about the number of hands you're going to be exposed to playing online versus playing live, they're not measurable. I mean, multiply that by the amount of tables, you're not waiting for a dealer, for players to react, etc., etc. I mean, it's, 20, 30, 40 times. Guys can get a whole summer in the World Series on one Sunday, on poker, not here, but on PokerStars and Full Tilt, etc.
Okay, I've been reluctant to go online, so maybe you and I can talk a little bit offline. I'm always scared to sort of go down that road. Plus, I do like the interaction piece of it.
Of course,
but from a pure number of hands played and experience perspective, I think it seems like online is a great way to.
Trust me, I think live poker is a lot more. I enjoy live poker more. Yeah. I mean, it's a lot more enjoyable.
But when you're grinding out a side income.
Yes, yeah. If you're trying, I should have phrased it this way. If you're trying to just purely make money at poker, online poker is like the best way to go. If like you're just trying to play poker recreationally, live poker is by far the way to go. It's way more fun. I mean, you get to play with people, you get to socialize. The whole not tells, but the whole just like seeing the person comes into play. You know, I mean, everything comes into play at that point. Online poker is just more. I don't want to say cold-blooded, but it's a lot more cold-blooded. Basically, you know, it's a lot more like you're gonna get exposed a lot quicker. Your weaknesses are gonna get exposed a lot quicker. Like if you're playing 2-5 or it's or 5-10 online and you're not sharp, you're not keeping up with the 5-10 field, you're going to lose a lot quicker than you will live.
Whatever edge you have or don't have is going to be magnified because of the number of hands played.
Right. And just the players are a lot better on average online versus live, just because they are exposed to X amount of more hands, the way they are approaching the game. So the competition is tougher, number of hands you're exposed to, and it's just, it's a lot more theory based. Versus live, you can do a lot of things that you can't do online. Like you can just get away with a lot more things, just because people give off so much information live that you don't get to see online. So you can do a lot more exploitable stuff that I guess I'm getting into like strategy here. But yeah, that's, for a recreational player, for people that just want to have fun, I think live is, and I enjoy it way more too. It's just, I don't really have time to always...
Like you said, when married and have a kid. And,
yeah.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I tend to look at it as... I'm always trying to maximize my ROI, but I'm also looking at it, because it's a hobby for me, because I'm recreational, I look at the ROE, which I refer to as return on enjoyment.
I like that.
So it's that piece too. If I'm going to invest 2, 3, 5, 6, 7 hours into a tournament, obviously I want to win, I want to do well, but there is the enjoyment piece. But if you're sitting here, I've got 2-3 hours at night and I want to grind out some extra income, that's hard to just go to a casino and say, I want something that starts at 8:30 p.m. and I've got to be done by 11.
Right.
It's a little harder to do that. So.
And the online schedule works really well because like the Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays are actually really good on the WPN network right now. And most of the tournaments start around 4 to 5 o'clock, but they have crazy late registration. So you can late register most of them until like 7:30 or whatever, 8 o'clock. If comfortably, you want to register them by about like 5:30 or so, 6 o'clock, to still have like 18 to 20 bigs at least.
Be deep stacked at 20 bigs. Right?
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing is like you're used to firing, and I mean it's funny because like if you fire a live tournament that's with like 20 bigs, you're like you feel like, man, what am I doing? Is this like, am I just gambling here? Even though I feel like my 20 big blind game is X amount better than like the average of person in this field. Online, I don't think twice about it. Just because.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's just because like the money is, but still, it's exponentially. I know it's all relative, so I know in my head it's all relative, but you don't even think about it. It's just weird.
Well, let's shift gears a little bit. Maybe we'll come back to that. But talking about yourself as a player, there's all these different categories, and as we've talked about, this podcast is geared more toward recreational players, but I know we have a number of top-level players that are also listening to this. But for us Recs, we hear about these different categories, different books, different people will talk about, they're a leg or a tag, or they're a calling station, or they're more patient, they're more aggressive, whatever. There's all these different categories of people. There's some that are more focused on, they're a field player versus they're more of a GTO type player, game theory optimal, analytic. If you were to describe yourself looking at you just in general terms, what sort of player are you?
I'm not really sure. I guess what's funny is when I listened to the MSBT podcast, like the first final table I made like last year or whatever, when Matt described, I can't remember who it was, maybe it wasn't Matt, but he goes, I don't know what to say about Vlad. Vlad is just, he didn't really say anything. It was just like, it was bizarre to try to listen to somebody who tried to describe you to the poker world, but yet they didn't really, I don't know. He just kind of said, I don't really know, which is maybe a good thing. That's kind of maybe the best case scenario for me, that somebody doesn't know what to tag me
Hopefully
as.
It was followed by, but he's really solid.
Yeah, but it probably was. I can't remember.
That's pretty complimentary.
But, and I can't remember if it was Matt or not, or maybe it was Alan or somebody, I can't remember. Regardless, I'm not really sure what I would consider myself as. I guess, I'd like to say that I just adapt to whatever the table gives me, or whatever the flow of the table is. I mean, I've looked at certain sessions, like, I mean, I know HUDs are for everybody and they're a whole different discussion, but like I can look at the end of my sessions on my HUDs and my stats.
Explain what a HUD is for people that aren't aware of.
It's basically a heads-up display that keeps track of certain statistics of yourself and other players as you're playing, and you choose whatever statistics you want it to track. And I guess the tricky thing about HUDs is it's up to you how to interpret those stats. A lot of people misuse HUDs, and it can like derail some people's careers just because they're misusing that information, or they're only relying on that information to make their decisions, which that's wrong. That information is just there to provide you frequencies of people's plays. It's up to you to incorporate it, to make sure that you have enough data to supplement that information, that it's relative,
right,
what it means, at what point of the tournaments did those come up. Like, do you just have a bunch of hands on somebody from like the early stages of a tournament? A lot goes into it. So I can look at my stats on some days, and I can be like, wow, I played like a maniac today. And then I can look at my stats some days and I can be like, wow, I played really nitty today, So I'm not really sure. I just like to think of myself, at least, that I just adapt to whatever the situation is and whatever the table is playing. If the table is full of really competent, aggressive players, I'm going to keep my ranges in check, and I'm going to be more balanced, and I'm going to be more protected. But if the table is more passive and I don't, even if maybe there's only like one or two like aggressive, competent players, but the rest are fairly like a combination of like passive or like maybe bad rags or whatever recreationals, then I'm gonna try to push whatever edge I can get that I think I can get away with, unless I see otherwise. But I'm still gonna choose my spots carefully, because I don't want to expose. You don't want to expose what you're doing really quick, because But yeah, basically, aside from that, I guess I don't really know how to describe myself. That's
interesting. You're not the first person we've interviewed to say that, and as a recreational player, that seems like that's a pretty primary topic in a lot of poker books. Not that that's always the answer, but as we're looking at this, I think a lot of us are saying, it's important to label people, to understand people, who they are, their leg, their tag, whatever that is, and then try to use that. But as I'm talking to people that are much more experienced, what I'm hearing is, we don't have a set style. We are adjusting to the table, which of course makes perfect sense. So I'm wondering if, from a recreational perspective, there's maybe too much energy, too much effort, too much thought put into trying to label these players as one thing or another, versus saying, well, they're adapting just like I'm adapting, so they might not actually be, a leg player, a loose aggressive player. They might actually be something else, but now they're adapting because we're all being passive.
Yeah. And I get that, and it's one thing. It's very different between labeling other players and labeling yourself. And when you're labeling other players, you're just trying to make it easy for yourself to remember how they're playing, basically. But I'd say you got to be really careful labeling players. Online and live, and I can make when I make notes online, and it's the same thing when you make mental notes live. Anybody can misplay a hand one time, or anybody can come in one session because they had a bad day at work or a fight with their wife and play like a completely different game that they would have ever played otherwise. Online, somebody could just be same thing, same situation, or maybe when you've seen them play before, it was only in the early stages of the tournament, but when it's close to the bubble, this guy really picks up his frequencies, his 3-bets, his 4-bets. Regardless, you just got to be careful labeling people based on sample size. If you only see somebody do that one thing one time, just keep that in mind. But I wouldn't say base your game versus that person on that one thing all the time. So if you see somebody make like a really poor like 3-bet call off, don't just always assume that when he's gonna 3-bet that he's gonna have like this hand or that hand, and he may call off with it incorrectly. He could have just had like keep that in mind. However, that like
they're capable.
They're capable of that, exactly. That they may do that, but
because I've done that too, where I've been 3-bet pre-flop. It ends up getting to showdown and they have 9-4 or whatever. And of course they're just making a play, and especially before I understood the what really was going to a 3-bet
Right,
before I
right.
realized it was more than just the cards.
Right.
And so then I had this mental picture of, okay, this guy's range is I could never put him on a hand,
Right.
on a range of cards. And then I realized, over time playing with him more and more that that was a one-time read.
Yeah,
He's actually
yeah.
a fairly straightforward sort of player.
Yeah, and even so, when people do that, when people 3-bet hands like 9-4 and they get the showdown with them, I mean, you do need to make a deep mental note about that, because that does
says something about my game.
Yeah, no. Well, no. I mean
okay.
You got to keep that in, because I mean, that's just getting like too creative. I mean, really, in a sense, like, I guess we don't need to get into like deep into strategy, but I mean, it's just like people can try like too hard. I mean, and that's just like that's maybe the epitome of somebody that's not necessarily doing something wrong or did something goofy that hand. He just tried too hard. Maybe he saw the right spot. It wasn't the right opportunity. It was the right, so just
putting all of his eggs in the fold equity basket, not having any hand equity.
Yeah. I mean, it's not, because I mean, it's like the idea of 3-betting and taking control of the hand is really appealing to some people, but you got to remember what goes into it is how often they're defending, how often they're 4-betting, how they're playing post flop, what board textures are you looking for, what board textures are good for your range, for his range, how playable is your hand post, how many big blinds you're going to have, what your stack to pot ratio going to be, and how many streets you're willing to go with it on certain boards. So it's a lot's going to go into it than just simply, player A opened, I think he's been opening a lot, it's time for me to 3-bet without caring what my cards are. However, a lot of people fall into that trap because they'll see what they think is a good player doing that, but not really understanding why he's doing that or with what cards he's exactly doing that, and mainly the reasoning that he's doing that, like what spot does he see, so like the most dangerous thing is people just like seeing somebody do something and then they try to like copy it, verbatim, without really understanding why they're doing it. Yeah.
Well, you brought. I mean, this is actually couldn't have been much of a better segue. You mentioned. I mean, you just instantly listed off about 12 different considerations, and for those of us, less experienced players, when we're breaking down a hand, we'll do that on the podcast, and this is more of a general podcast, but we'll break down hands, and when we're doing that, we can look at all of those things and and evaluate them. But in the flow of the game, especially you're playing a $75 buy-in tournament where the levels are quick or whatever, there's so much information that it seems like we're supposed to know, or so many considerations like you just listed that we're supposed to be taking into account when we're deciding what to do. But for most of us that don't have the number of hands or whatever, or we're not quick-witted enough or something, it just feels like too much information. And so if you're looking at that, giving advice to a recreational player or some even a more advanced player, what are those key things? I mean, can you even say that?
Yeah,
I mean, you're looking at me puzzled because all you guys can process all this information.
Well, no. I mean,
but you listed stack size and what's their frequency and all these things.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect somebody to like consider all that in game like as they're doing it. It's just something that you should be like naturally aware of as you're doing it. Like I can't say that like every factor that I want to go through my head goes through my head when I'm making a decision. It's just more like you have to do your like studying off the felt, and you just hope that with practice and with analyzing enough data that it comes into fruition as you're playing naturally, basically, instinctively, once you study it enough. But what was your main question again? Repeat that again.
No, I can kind of change the question, because what I'm hearing from you is here's all the things that need to be considered, but really that's through experience, through study. And so when you're in a hand like that, or whatever it is, whether it's a big spot or not, are you actually thinking through sort of an itemized checklist like that, or is it really just you're just trusting that
I remember what
you're just trusting that your instincts are kicking in, and maybe there's some specific things that you have to go through, but in general, all of those things that you listed, those are mostly just inherent. They become like position in the hand. You just know you're in position.
No, I guess I remember what I was going to say about your original question when you first asked this. I mean, that's what it's important to learn about. Basically, you don't want to play. I mean, people say GTO a lot, but I mean, it's important to know like the basis of like what is considered like the GTO plays. But I mean, I would say like when you're playing small stake tournaments, like Joey Ingram says this a lot. Actually, if you listen to his podcast, and he's absolutely correct. And I mean, I couldn't have advocated this more enough on myself too. When you're playing low stake tournaments, low stake cash games, you should not be trying to play like perfect GTO, because GTO is only like applicable when you're playing against other like very good players that are trying to play GTO as well. Otherwise, when you're just playing against like low stakes players that are just playing the cards that are dealt, you should be trying to exploit every possible spot instead of worrying about balancing your ranges or worrying about GTO, etc., etc.
You can come in here. We can.
Yeah. You can just leave the food anywhere.
We've got a special guest here. Hi, would you like to join the podcast?
Thanks.
No.
Thanks. That's my wife Marina. She just brought me some food.
Nice to meet you. Now we have food on the Rec Poker Podcast.
That's right. We got snacks and chips.
You're setting the bar higher for every other guest now.
That's right. But yeah, you should still. What I was getting at is you should still try to figure out or try to learn about. I don't want to say GTO, but basically about like the correct way of play, the principles of it. So by studying like online training videos or talking to like highly knowledgeable players, bringing your hands to them and having them critique their hands, and just like watching them play or playing online poker yourself and having them analyze your hands, because you do want to know the backbones of it. You want to know what it's composed of. You want to know the correct thing to do in basically every spot. It's just that you don't need to follow those guidelines, especially in the lower stake stuff. Because when you get in the lower stake stuff, you should really be trying to exploit as much as possible, and you really should be trying to adjust everybody else, because so many people are doing things just because they don't. Not that they don't care, they don't know, so it's just, but yeah, if you don't know, like you said, you get to a spot and you're like, even if it's $150 or $1,000 buy-in tournament, and you're like, I've never played with this guy, he seems like, he's like 50 years old, he could be a recreational, or he could be a guy that's played, 500 tournaments, you're not sure. Mm-hmm. If you're not sure going into the hand, you want to rely on GTO. You want to rely on like the theory of the game, basically the math, to carry you through your decisions unless you see otherwise. So if you're not sure if you should be 3-betting this hand versus him, you should just follow like basic principles like of GTO, like which follow through strict guidelines of like what ranges you should be 3-betting with 20 to 25 big blinds, 25 to 30 big blinds, etc. And GTO doesn't take into effect who opened or like what kind of style. This guy was like crazy, or this guy was like really nitty. No, like GTO is just very cold. Like it just tells you what hands you should do what with when you're presented a situation, and that's it.
It's like a default sort of thing. So I could say GTO might tell me in this spot I should 3-bet with pocket sixes or ace jack or better, whatever
and it's not necessarily,
but then I can consider like
and it's not necessarily factors. GTO. It's just like the correct way of
DV.
The correct way, the correct theory of playing the game. Basically, like what I would consider. I mean, you just want to have your structure, your backbone to the game. And then you want to know when and how you want to deviate away from that.
So it gives you the default, and then I can consider layer on top of that sort of, but they're looser than normal, or their stack, they put in a third of their stack, or some of these other things kind of come into play, but you start with this, this default sort of range.
Correct. And more importantly, what goes into that is, this guy's open X, 5 out of the 7 hands, or this guy has gone a showdown, and I've seen him showdown these hands, or he's 3-bet X amount of times,
wider or narrower than normal.
Yes. Yeah. He's 3-bet 5 times out of however many opportunities he's had to 3-bet in the last 3 orbits.
And he keeps getting them through.
Okay. So you got to keep all that in mind. But aside from that, you want to. It's hard because there's not, aside from advocating run at once, there's not really. And I guess I've never used, Upswing, but I know I've been on Card Runners. And what else can I advocate for a training site? I've toyed around with Tournament Poker Edge before, but mostly because some of the guys that were putting out training videos on that website I was playing against on Carbon and stuff, so it was kind of nice. I was telling you to watch the training sites of some of the guys that you're playing against, but Yeah, like Run It Once and Card Runners and probably Upswing, you can really learn about the bases, the theory of the game, and what you should have as your defaults. But you should always be critiquing them as well, because especially when they're doing their live sweats, because nobody plays perfect. Nobody's gonna play like a slate of tournaments, a full Sunday and record it and not make any mistakes. It's silly to think that, and that's the thing, nobody's going to play a live tournament. Well, I mean, you're going to have some tournaments here and there where you're just going to play them flawlessly, but it's going to be rare. But nobody's going to play an entire tournament without making mistakes. I mean, that's the most laughable thing is people's like,
right.
oh, I've been playing perfect and just getting unlucky and just... Nobody's doing that.
Right.
I mean, like, I can think of X amount of mistakes I make every live tournament, so I guarantee you...
Even if you win a tournament,
yeah.
you've left chips on the table at some point,
yeah.
or you got it in bad, or...
Well, not necessarily that.
Whatever.
You're just making theoretical mistakes
right.
that you're not even aware of. Yeah, right. Yeah. So it's...
Let me ask you this, as in terms of, learning the game, and I think I've been flawed in my approach to learning the game. Mm-hmm. And so I'm, as everybody knows that listens to this, I'm very transparent with things. But one of the things that I've run into at least a year ago, and I'm trying to figure out how to best make this better, but like it's almost like I have this checklist of things that I'm trying to remember, and I think a lot of the rec players that I talk to struggle with this too. Mm-hmm. Okay, I need to think about this, or I need to remember this, and so I'm paying attention to, okay, here's their bet relative to what their stack size is. Here's the frequency with which it seems like they're betting. It seems like, at least in general terms, they're opening a lot of pots. Here's my my ship stack size. Here's what I think the stack to pot ratio will be after the flop. Here's where we are in the tournament. We're middle stages, nearing the bubble or whatever. I mean, there's all of these different things, and so I have like this checklist of things. And then when it comes to a decision point, I'm like, well, how do I use that? Like, okay, well, he's raising with 25 big blinds, but what if he was raising with 50? How would I actually use that information? And we don't have to get into all the details of what that actually means, but I think there's a flaw in how many of us are learning the game. We're like trying to memorize things like, oh, okay, they did that with 50 instead of 25, and I noticed that. Okay, when they had 25 blinds, they went 3x. When they had 50 big blinds, they went 4x. Okay, I've noticed that, but how do I use that? And so I think there's a lot of us that are out there going, okay, I'm noticing things, I'm observing things, but I don't really know what to do with it now that I have this information. So what? And it makes me wonder: are we thinking about the wrong things, or are we thinking about it in the wrong way? Or are we learning the game as a checklist rather than fundamental principles?
Yeah, I would say you probably hit the nail on the head with those last 3-4 things. Is that say you're just worrying about the wrong thing? I mean, all of that is really good to notice. I mean, that's like really excellent that you're actually focusing and paying attention in that, but trying to base your decisions or base like the way you're playing based on that is like impossible, because you're not ever gonna know like the real reasoning why somebody 4x'd when they had 50 big blinds, and then when they had 100 big blinds, double the stack, they start min raising.
Right.
Like
it happens.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you're like, well, that makes no sense.
Is it based on the hand? Is it you don't know why?
Yeah. So I mean, and you start paying attention to that, and you're like, well, when he got to showdown, when he 4x'd, he had a really big hand, and you make a mental note of that. Sometimes you're not going to get to see those things, but regardless, I think it's great that you're paying attention to those things, but you shouldn't be trying to base like your play on that. You should just try to use that as useful information versus that specific player. But it seems to me, or it sounds to me like it's a little bit of overanalyzing. Basically, it's you want to have the basic principles of like ranges. Basically, if I could describe poker in like one sentence, I would just say poker is just no limit tournaments, specifically because I'm sure the majority of people listening to this or that we're trying to approach or are playing no limit tournaments, it's just a game of ranges, and the game of ranges changes as the dynamics of the tournament change. When we get deeper, shallower in the bland, as the average stack gets deeper and shallower throughout the middle and late stages of the tournament. But other than that, like, noticing what some people are doing is phenomenal to try to exploit that person or that type of player. But that's about it. Like, that doesn't mean that you should say Like, you shouldn't look at, and even seeing a good player do something, that doesn't mean you should say, oh, this good player did this, I'm going to go try to do that too.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you shouldn't do that. You should just try to understand why he did that. Maybe look at, like, his opponent, maybe look at the positions that they were at the table, try to remember what had happened before that, if you remember any hands they played, and try to see if you can incorporate that into your own strategy, into how you feel comfortable playing, how you can adapt that into your game. But you shouldn't try to mimic, good things just because a good player does them, and you shouldn't try to, like, take something bad that somebody does and try to, like, label that to, like, everything that you see. It's hard to explain, I guess, but you shouldn't overanalyze things that could be completely random, basically.
Yeah, that's good.
You should try to see how you can exploit their weaknesses. So, for example, if you notice that this player is coming into, every time it folds around to them, and say the button or cutoff or hijack, they're always opening. Like, whether they're opening to two times, 3 times the blinds, or 5 times the blinds, that's another aspect of the strategy. The fact that they're just opening every time it folds to them, that's the bigger thing that you want to focus on, is what that tells you. Then you want to start paying attention to how often they open in early position, how often they defend their big blinds, and you just want to develop counter strategies versus them based on how frequently they're doing certain things, not so much like what they're doing, like, exploitively within those things, if that makes any sense. Yeah. Because that, like I said, like, that person may not even understand why they're doing that. So trying to, like, decipher that yourself may be impossible.
So keeping your eyes on the main action is the opening.
Yes.
The minor action is the sizing, which may have an opportunity to explain later.
Sizing isn't minor. Sizing is very important. Like, it actually tells you a lot about, it fluctuates the ranges a lot in hands. Like, it's actually a very important thing. It's just that you may not, without seeing them go to showdown frequently with certain hands, which, or just realizing that when they, like, min raise, for example, and say a certain flop comes, and they, like, c-bet once and then they give up on the turn, you just know that, like, whatever, maybe they don't have it when they min raise, or then when they 4x, they're always, like, betting big. Like besides that, or, like, when they get the showdown, if they don't go to showdown, or, like, nobody, like, stands up to them, everybody's always folding, you may not know, and they may not know why they're doing that, I guess is what I'm trying to get at.
Okay.
But you should just try to focus on how you can exploit that person. Like, basically, if you're seeing them play too many hands, I mean, that's the main thing. If you're seeing, okay, well, how do I exploit that? If I'm going to start 3-betting him, is he going to defend my 3-bets properly? How is he going to play his range post-flop? Is he going to 4-bet me properly? How deep are we? I mean, can I, you can't just want to do this and then just pick a random hand when you're, like, 20 big blinds and just decide to...
Now's my moment.
Now's my moment, yeah. So that's the main thing that you want to do, is, like, develop strategies versus these people, not just try to decipher what they're doing, if that makes sense.
That's good, yeah. Yeah, I wanted to ask you, well, I have a billion questions to ask you, but one of the things is you mentioned some of this probably already embedded in there, but as you play different tournaments, you play mostly, when you play live, you play mostly the bigger tournaments, the 1100s and more, which, I mean, for some of you guys are saying that's a small tournament. I get that.
No.
But, as you've played either that tournament or even smaller or whatever in your history, when you look at the players that are clearly over their head a little bit, or they want a satellite, they never would buy into this otherwise, or they're just the poorer end of the spectrum, what are some of the biggest mistakes that you see?
Man, they vary so much between players, and the mistakes are so different. It really depends. It really depends on the player. It really depends on their situation. It could be a guy that, for example, is very wealthy and doing very well in life, and he just basically treats this $1,100 like to me, an $1,100 tournament is like a big deal. I mean, it's like, I don't take them lightly. They're you can go on a, like, 20, 30, 40 non-cash streak in tournaments very, very easily. People just don't
Right.
really
Oh, yeah.
people just don't really understand that. So just think about that. If your average buy-in is 1K, just think about what your bankroll should be. People just don't want to like think about those things. But regardless, it could be from a guy that's wealthy in life that just is playing too many hands, playing too loose passive, opening a lot, and just calling 3-bets and like not taking initiative in the hand, just like check calling
Just
a lot,
burning through chips.
just like check calling a lot and giving up. It could be a guy that's, like you said, in over his head too much, that put way too much of his bankroll in it, or like whatever got staked in it, even though like he shouldn't have, and like asked for a stake, and like he's basically playing scared, or it could be a mixture of things. But I would say the biggest thing is people are focusing on the wrong things. I mean, people are, and that's, I guess, a very broad thing to say, but people are just like, people are trying too hard, I guess. That's what I would say. And like, if I can make one comment about that demographic, I guess, of players, is people are just like trying to overanalyze things too much. They're trying to, if they see a good player, I can't tell you how many times, and I mean, it's not like against me, or I see it when like somebody else sits down that's like a known player, and you see a certain type of player always try to go at him hard to try to like prove to that player that they can play, and they end up like donating their chips to him just because they're taking these spots that they wouldn't have otherwise taken, just because they're trying to like show them up or something. They
don't tell their buddies they busted Fox
or whatever, or they bluffed so-and-so in a big hand, they bluffed Koo in a big hand, or they bluffed Aaron in a big hand, or whatever.
Who ends up ultimately getting their chips later.
Well, regardless, or it could be that, like I said, it really depends on the person. Just to say that like there's one mistake that certain people make is, I would just say like playing too many hands is just basically one hand people, but I could say that people don't play enough hands either. So it's hard to say. I've been into many 1Ks where I thought my tables were way too nitty, and I thought my tables were way too loose. So I'm not really sure. I guess some people just don't defend their big blind enough. Some people, it's... So
it's not an obvious sort of, here's the mistake I see. It's the players that just are less experienced or don't care, basically.
I would say just less experience. That's the thing, is online poker just gives you the experience part. Like, you can... That's why you see a lot of these, like, the younger generation of players, that they grind in online poker and, take it seriously in their college days and whatever, and turn it into their job, doing so well, because just the sheer number of volume of hands that they got exposed to. Now they got to adapt. That doesn't mean that they're going to be successful in the live scene. There's plenty that were not, because they just weren't able to take that information and adapt it to the live scene. There's certain things that are correct to do in online poker that are not correct to do live poker, and vice versa. So if you're not adjusting correctly, you're just going to get burned. But I'd say, just from a strict like theory perspective, get your learning from online and try, like, basically have it ingrained in you what you want to do with your ranges when your stack is X amount of big blinds. Be able to play 3 to 5 big blind, 5 to 7, 7 to 10, 10 to 15, 15 to 20 big blind stack, 20 to 25, etc. Don't just be able to play, well, I know how to play 20 big. I know that I'm supposed to shove these hands with 20 big blinds, and then people get under 20 big blinds, like, and they're in over the head in this tournament. They're like, oh my god, I have 50 big blinds. Like, I'm short. I'm gonna bust. I'm never gonna make it. And you see them take these ridiculous shove spots where I can't tell you, like, 15 big blinds can mean so much in a tournament. Like, I can't tell you how many tournaments you can make it deep in from having just a couple of big blinds, let alone 15. So
that's an area that I've been trying to work on myself, because I tended to be more the get desperate earlier piece, and because you want to maximize fold equity. That's what the books say, But then you end up shoving your king 7 over raise.
I guess maybe I would say that's probably, maybe I would say the biggest mistake I see, if I could like see one, is people just don't know how to play their sub 20 big blind stacks correctly, because they automatically think that anything below 20 big blind stacks is panic time, where I would venture to say that almost every tournament, and I mean, I've heard multiple good players say this, almost every tournament that somebody wins, they had to battle more than likely sub 10 big blind stack
Right.
at one point or another. Maybe not. I mean, there's obviously rules to the exception, but more often than not, you're going to be 7 to 10 big blinds deep at some point in the tournament, and how you play your shove fold range is very, very important.
And I would say, especially for those of us who play the smaller buy-in tournaments, the 30s to 60s to $75 tournaments, when you hit the final table, the average stack is 15 big blinds.
Yeah.
So 7 to 10 big blinds is an awful lot of equity in that final table.
Yeah, and I mean, you want to know two things. I mean, you want to know shoving ranges there, and you want to know ICM. I mean, those are two big. Those are basically the two major things there, and they're going to go hand in hand there. But yeah, during the middle, late, and final table stages, just having your shoving ranges, and now there's so many apps and tools and ways to learn online for free about your shoving ranges. They should just be, people can more or less, if you want to memorize something, you can memorize shoving ranges, because shoving ranges aren't based on whether a player is tight or nitty or aggressive. They're just a stat. It's just, you have X amount of blinds and you're in this position. Okay, go all in or fold.
What does John Nash say I should do? Right?
Exactly. Or I mean, you can base it. There's the Nash way, and then I believe there's like the Skalansky, and then there's like 2 or 3 or 4 different whatever theory ranges that you can go off on. But yeah, I mean, I would say that's probably one of the bigger mistakes is people just and you see that in one case too, from a number of different types of players, that people just don't really know what they can do with their small stacks and how valuable they are.
Fair enough. Well, let me switch gears. I'm going to ask you a hand situation, but I don't know if you've listened to the other podcasts. I've done this with each of other guests, so but it's intentionally incredibly vague. All right, so I'm not going to give you much information. Usually you break down a hand and you're like, here's all the information. You break it down and say what's the right way to do it. What I want to get from you is just what comes to mind as far as those pieces of information that you absolutely need to know, whether it's about the person or the situation or whatever it is, in order to make a decision. All right, so under the gun opens. You're on the button. So the person in the cutoff, the person to your right, calls. All right, so we've got an open from under the gun. We've got a call on your right, and you're on the button to pick up ace-jack. What information do you need to know to make a decision?
There's if somebody can tell you a concrete answer based on that hand history, you shouldn't listen to them.
But what comes to mind as far as those things? I can't even consider this if I don't know.
Well, let me tell you this. I guess for a proper, I guess let's just start at point A. If you guys want to know, or if you want to know, I guess what you need, you don't need all this information for like a proper hand history. I would say for a proper hand history, if you want to bring it to like a knowledgeable player and you want to actually get like their real advice for it, you want to know you want to know the exact big blinds that you and the opponent have. No, just just advice. So you want to know like the big blinds that you and the villain have, the positions you're in, what the blinds are, and that's about it. So I'm in this position. I have X amount of big blinds. The blind is this, and the villain is this deep. That's it. You don't really need much more than that. Some people like get super in depth of like, but this guy was like on his 3rd or 4th beer, and he like got into a fight with his girlfriend. And that's great to like denote all that. But I guess more importantly is just remember those like 3 or 4 things:
blinds, bet size,
like what your stack size, what the blinds are, and the positions.
Yep.
That's basically the 3 things you should always know when you're given a hand history. However, answering a hand like that, it's so ingrained in me. I talk to a few of my like good friends probably every day regarding hands. We have like a group text, and it's me, Ku, and Aaron, obviously. And it's like when we share hands, I mean, like I said, we probably, maybe not every day, but say like every other day or every couple of days, or sometimes it's like multiple hands a day. Like, we're so used to talking about hands in that perspective that for me to give you an answer based on no information, I literally cannot say anything about it. This hand can literally be a straight fold. If it goes, guy opens with 12 big blinds under the gun, where like his opening range is like queens up, because he should be open shoving all his hands, like my ace-jack is just going to be thrown into the muck in the speed of lightning.
Right. So, and that's what I'm talking about. Like normal. I'm doing this intentionally for you to say. I mean, obviously, this isn't how I present a hand history. Like, what should I do with ace-jack? It's the idea is what are those things that you're just like I can't even. So those. So you're saying blinds, bet size.
So those 3 things are actually the answer to probably this question.
Yeah.
So it's the stack size. So how many big blinds you have. You want to think of everybody at your table as a number of big blinds. You don't even, that's like the number thing you should always keep track of. Everybody at your table is how many big blinds they have and how many big blinds you have in your stack. If you're not doing that, you're making a critical mistake, because then when it comes time to the heat of the battle, your brain's just not going to think fast enough to calculate, oh my God, he started with this amount of big blinds. I made it 2.5. He made it 6 big blinds. Now the pot has 13.5. Like a half pot size, so you just want to have all that ingrained. And then you want to know what the blinds are. And you just want to keep track of the pot, and you just want to, and that's really about it. You just want to know what position they're opening from, how many big blinds they're opening from, and I guess the rest of the field, what sort of stack sizes. Like if this guy's opening under the gun with 20 big blinds, and there's like several 10 big blind stacks to the left of him, he just should not have a hand that's weak, like ever, in theory, because he's going to have to call off a 10 BB stack, which is going to be half his stack, and it's really not very pleasing to race full to a 10 big blind stack, because you're burning money long term, but you don't want to call off half your stack lightly. So that gives you a lot about that person's range.
Assuming he's a thinking player.
Yeah. But if he's not, if it's like a random Joe Schmo, and it's the first time you've seen him, you still have to like basically assume that, unless you're proven otherwise. Like you can't just go off theory in that situation unless you know otherwise. So just keep that in the back of your mind, basically. So if you don't know, if you're not sure, just revert back to your defaults, which is what should you do in theory. In theory, he should not have a hand that he's going to raise full there.
Right.
So, or at least be very, very minimal. I mean, you can actually, but it's just be like a very like small part of his range. So
just touching on a little bit of strategy here, and we don't need to go too deep, but just like this is one of those situations where I say, okay, I can pay attention to the information, but so what? And I know you're going to be laughing inside, but like, okay, they have 25 big blinds, I have 40 big blinds. They raise in that situation versus they have 40 and I have 25. I look at that and I'm like, okay,
those are two different situations.
Right, I paid attention to that, so I know they're two different situations, but I don't really know how to use that. Is the stack size, because this keeps coming up every interview, is that stack size. Stack size is so critical. And I'm like, well, we're both, I know this sounds bad, but I'm transparent. I'm like, we're both fairly deep, like we both could play this hand, but is the issue that who has the other one covered, that it potentially determine life, or is it really that bet out of a 25 big blind stack is a lot stronger than that bet out of a 40 big blind stack?
Both things, and I mean for different reasons. I mean, like in theory, his ranges with a 25 BB stack opening on the gun should be tighter than a 40 BB stack opening on the gun, but you got to know what type of player it is. I mean, there are some players that, depending on who's in the big blind and who's on the button, etc., who's on the table, they will try to open, but in theory, they should, they still, if it's full ring, 9-handed, you can't get away with that much more of opening up your ranges under the gun with 25 BBs versus 40 BBs. When you're the guy on the button, for example, when you have a hand like Ace Jack with 25 big blinds, I mean, it's like, I'll explain the differences like in this way. If there's a guy that's like a good loose aggressive competent reg that's 40 big blinds deep opening under the gun, and say it's like 8-handed, and then the guy in the cutoff to the right of you calls with, say, like also 40 big blinds, and you have Ace Jack with 25 big blinds on the button, what should be going in your head is this a good squeeze spot? Basically, how often is this guy's open under the gun? And your squeeze should just basically be all in.
Yeah.
There's no reason to make a 3-bet that's not all in here, because
half your stack.
It's not. It shouldn't be half your stack, because your 3-bet here in theory should be like between 9.5 to 10, maybe 11 big blinds. So I mean, I guess whatever. It's close. It's gonna be damn near half your stack. You're right. So, and you just like a lot of awkward things happen. Like you're basically making your hand look a lot stronger than it is, which is like maybe a good thing. But if that guy was deeper, he's gonna peel a lot there, and then what are you gonna do? You're gonna end up playing Ace Jack there, even if it's in position. It's not the hand that plays
then he
great.
donk bets at you.
Yeah. So I mean, well, no, I wouldn't worry. Do not worry about anybody donk betting in you, because it should just
Okay.
It shouldn't be anything that concerns you, because people do it so infrequently that even when it does it shouldn't be anything that goes into your consideration. Oh, this guy could donk bet into me, because not everybody, but even most amateurs know by now that you should check to the pre-flop aggressor, and I mean rarely somebody will, but regardless, you should But yeah, with that situation with 25 big blinds, it becomes a very good spot to 3-bet rip if the criteria is this guy is a loose aggressive, competent regular that's open under the gun, and he's been, say, opening at a decent frequency in early position. Say the blind is maybe a recreational, or maybe somebody that doesn't defend their blinds properly, whatever. And the guy in the cutoff is maybe
not really tricky.
not a guy that's not gonna try to balance his range and flat like aces there or kings, so that you think every time with a premium he's gonna 3-bet. Yeah, it becomes with 40 big blinds, you can still consider squeezing, but now your squeeze has to be 9.5 to 11 big blinds. And what are you gonna do at that point? Or you can consider flatting. Or if you think that this guy that's opening under the gun, if he has 25 big blinds, and you think man, there's 2 10 big blind stacks to the left of him, and he's got 25 bigs, even though I have 40 bigs, he's just never going to open a hand that's not going to be able to cut off the 10 big blind stacks. Ace Jack can become a fold there, even with 40 big blinds.
Yep.
Yeah. So it depends a lot on how you construct that person's range, how your stack plays against that range, and there's too many variables that go into it, but I would say those two spots are very different, and for various reasons.
So that makes sense. Dude. Yeah, we're almost out of time. This is so good. I mean, thanks for sharing some of that strategy piece.
Not a problem.
It helps more than you realize. That helps those of us that are out here trying to reconcile all of this information and what to do with it.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably the easier thing for me to talk about, is just straight poker strategy versus talking about myself or something
we'll do
that.
That's what everybody said. The idea going into the interviews was really, let's just talk strategy. But I think everybody has this interesting story, and the feedback we've gotten, now that we've done several of these interviews, so John Redding, Joe Bernard, Matt Hamilton, and yourself, as people they're starting to feel like they get to know people a little bit. And you're not giving away, I don't think, too much information, but people are starting to feel like the poker community is becoming, get to know you. So I appreciate you taking the time, and I think the other guys are too, let's just talk hands. Let's just talk hands.
No.
But it's good. But I do want to talk a little bit. I want to give you. I know you're humble enough, so you won't really like this, but I was looking at Hendon Mob, and I don't know how much you guys really pay attention to that, but I was looking at your GPI, your Global Poker Index rating right now is 906.
I guess I did not pay attention to that, but all right,
according to the Hendon Mob, you're the top 1,000 players in the world. Now, I know there's a lot that goes into that sort of thing. You're 58th in the all-time money list in Minnesota, which is cool. But what I thought was interesting is you got a couple guys ahead of you that you need to catch here. So Joe Bernard is in 53rd, and your buddy Aaron is up there in 44th.
Yep.
So I think you got to go after them.
And I love both those guys. And trust me, they're both very good players, and they're putting in some volume. So it's not going to be easy to catch anybody on that list. So especially not those two guys. They're pretty hungry. Yeah,
they are. And Aaron, we're going to have him on the show as well.
Yeah, no, trust me, I'm pretty hungry as well. So hopefully this summer some good things will happen. We'll see.
But I was looking at your 906 in the GPI ratings, and it looks like they kind of take the last 3 years and they give you points, and so it's not this perfect system, but it gives you an idea where you're at. So I was looking at a few of the guys that are around you in that range, and you may or may not be aware of this. So just ahead of you got John Morgan, you got Phil Mater, and you got Neil Blumenfield.
Right.
So Neil's 900.
Yep.
So, and just right on your tracks now, you got Evgeny Timoshenko. He's 909. He's he's just behind you. Eli Elezer's 907.
I don't know if I've ever seen that. Or
Zvi Stern and Jonathan Duhamel are right on your. So you're ahead of those guys.
Interesting.
Right? So that's pretty good.
I did not know this. The thing is, it's such and even live tournament scores are just so misleading. I mean, people don't really know what really goes on in the poker world, and what a Hendon Mob really is, what tournament winnings, quote unquote. I'll put my air quotes up right now if nobody can see them, but I mean it's such a different world than what people realize. I mean, between selling pieces and staking and how many tournaments people play without cashing and rebuys and et cetera. It's a very misleading world, but I mean that's a whole different topic.
It is. I totally agree. And what gets points, what doesn't get points. I know. I mean, I don't play the big tournaments, so all of my the Minnesota listing the ranking doesn't include weekly tournaments. Well, that's
Right.
pretty much all that we play.
Right.
Not that
right.
I would not that I'd be anywhere near
Well,
the
no,
thing, but
yeah.
it's misleading. But one of the things that, and just I know we got to wrap up, but you mentioned this, like one of the things a lot of us Recs are wondering about, especially those of us like myself who track everything because I'm an analytical dude and I like to know my ROI and all those different things. But like it's hard to frame up like how am I doing? Like obviously your ROI is positive. That means you're overcoming the rake and you're winning money. So that's a good thing. But what's a good ROI? I'm in the money this percentage of the time. Okay, is that good or bad? And not that it's about comparing yourself to others, but as I'm looking at, I'm trying to balance like my in the moneyness with my overall overall ROI. I want it to be as high as possible, but in the moneyness with what's my multiple when I do cash. So like, because I could get in the money a lot, but min cash and I'm a losing player, or I could get in the money less but play super aggressive, too aggressive where my cashes are big, but I'm in the money way too seldom. But there's sort of this optimal, and not that you have a target, but there's this optimal piece. And like, what is a good in the moneyness percentage? What is a good ROI? I mean, do you know if that data exists anywhere?
As far as a good in the,
Or do you have a handle on that?
No, I'm not sure that it's. I'm not sure that it's really something you should really care too much about. It. I mean, your ROI definitely should be something you care a lot about. But as far as how often you're in the money, like if your ROI is positive, if your ROI is good, the stuff in the money should take care of itself. So you don't need to worry about that. So I'd say just like get that out of your head because you don't want to be you don't want to be having certain strategies or certain things affected by. Oh, I want to make it in the money because I haven't made it in the money for X amount of tournaments.
Right.
You don't want to let that creep in your head. You just want to be very cold-blooded about it. And I mean, your ROI, if you're just thinking about your decisions as EV, basically as expected value, and your ROI is going to be positive, like I said, things should take care of themselves. Like, I don't try to get in the money like hard in tournaments.
Right.
Like I just try to put myself in the best position that I think I can put myself in to give myself a chance to win that tournament. Ultimately the goal is to win the tournament. Like all the money is like very top heavy in tournaments nowadays. So that's what you want to give yourself a chance to do is to make a deep final table run to take those top 3 spots. The stuff about cashing and how often you're cashing, if you're making the right decisions long term, which is really what you should just care about is your long term EV decisions, all those things should even out. Like live poker, your sample size is so small over such a long period of time that it may seem asinine because you're like, well, it's been a year. But it's like, okay, well, if you played one tournament a week or one tournament a month, I mean, that's between 12 and 50 tournaments a week. A year. I mean, that's nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, I will have that in one day sometimes, you know.
Exactly.
So, I mean, you know, people will overanalyze that and be like, well, I haven't cashed a tournament in a year. But it's like, man, you've played 15 tournaments.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you're only supposed to cash 10%.
Yeah.
It's completely random.
Well,
right?
I mean, it doesn't. It's not that you're supposed to cash X amount. I mean, like I said, if you're playing stake that you are theoretically crushing, for example, if you only play like the live $50 tournaments and you were like an excellent MTT grinder that you grinded your teeth online, you played some bigger stuff live, you played some live cash, you feel like you got a good grasp on the theory, but you're like, I'm just going to play $50 and $100 live binds and I just want to see how well I can do. I mean, you can be cashing like 6, 7 out of 10 and have like a 200% ROI on them. I mean, but it's all relative. I mean, those things are gonna. What I want to say is those are, I guess, not anomalies, but they are basically anomalies. And I mean, certain people are gonna be better at certain stakes, and you're gonna see certain people crushing certain stakes, and you're gonna see people losing at certain stakes.
Right.
But I'd say in overall, you should be looking to learn the game from a correct way in order to maximize your EV long term, and everything else is going to take care of itself.
All right, good stuff. Well, any final words you want to share with the listeners?
No, I mean, I guess thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in again. And I did listen to some of those other. I think I listened to the Joe and the Matt one. And yeah, I mean, I'm a fan. Hopefully, you'll continue having some more guys on. I'm excited to listen to Aaron's, and yeah, I'm looking forward to just grinding. There's a big series coming up on WPN, so I'm looking to battle that, and then just get ready to battle in the summer here. Hopefully we have some good things happening.
We got some MSPTs coming up. Are you doing the MSPTs?
Yeah, that's right.
Before Vegas?
Yep.
Yeah.
I will be playing the MSPTs before Vegas. Yep. I'm looking forward. There's one in Canterbury, right? Or,
Yeah.
Yep.
Canterbury,
Actually,
yep.
in Canterbury is really close to my house, so that's
Yeah.
actually my favorite event because it feels like home turf. So.
Well, since you mentioned Vegas, what's your Vegas plan? Do you go out there for the whole series? Or part of
I'm
it,
not
or?
going there for the whole series. I went there for a good chunk last year, and I was supposed to play my first main last year, but it didn't work out. I had to come home for some family stuff. But this year I will be playing the main, and I'll probably I don't want to be there for 3 weeks or whatever, 3.5 weeks like it was last year. I think I'll just do 3 short stints there. Probably the first 2 are surrounding the Millie Maker and the Monster Stack, and then play some couple 2-3 bracelet events depending on if I bust those or whatever goes on, and then maybe some side stuff at the Venetian or whatever.
Well, I
else.
can tell you there's going to be some serious fish out there because me and some buddies are going out there for a week this year. So if you're out there the same time we are, we'll come watch you. Don't come to us. We'll come watch you.
I wish you guys the best of luck, and hopefully we see each other on some final tables out there. Are you guys going out there for that MSPT and Venetian?
No, we're going to go out there and it's around the marathon.
Okay.
I don't know if we'll play the marathon. We might just play dailies.
Yeah. That marathon seems like a really good one.
Oh
though.
my gosh, I keep going back and forth on it. I mean, 100-minute levels, $2,600 buy-in, 5-day event.
But it really
but the edges are going to multiply though too for those who have the edge. But it allows you to be patient.
And it allows you to really pick your spots. It allows you to really get a good feel for most of your tables, to really utilize your stack, your EV the most. And I would say it's probably should be the least variance MTT if you play it correctly, and you know what you're doing. I mean, you can't just knit your way into the money either, but it gives you the most it gives you the best shot to utilize your stack to your advantage.
Yeah, for sure.
So
we'll see. Well, good luck on the summer.
Yeah,
Hopefully
thanks,
we'll catch up either before, during, or maybe after we celebrate your bracelet.
Let's do it all 3 times.
I keep telling people, you play All In for Africa, you're on the Rec Poker podcast, good things are going to happen. So
right.
I look forward to it.
I like it, man. Thanks.
Okay, well, thanks once again to Vlad for taking the time to be interviewed with us. I also want to give a quick shout out to Nancy Patterson from Arizona. Nancy sent a great email encouraging us with the work that we're doing at the Rec Poker podcast, and I want to thank her for taking the time to do that. Thanks to others who have encouraged us. I want to invite all of you to reach out to us. Let us know what you like. Let us know what you don't like, what you'd like to see more of, all of those things. You can do that through Rec Poker on Twitter. We have a Facebook group. Feel free to email me directly, stevefredlund@gmail.com, or any other way that you want to get a hold of us. Let us know how it's going. And again, thank you to the Free Poker Network for supporting what we're doing here. And we will catch you next time. Thanks.